welcome to the We Listen by Night podcast, a wholly irregular podcast for those subjects difficult to illustrate well, at least for me. This podcast is designed to supplement the videos I make, not replace them. And here we are in the silent and dark wreckage of 10 Forward, aboard the crashed saucer section of the Enterprise D, on the surface of Veridian III. Look at what they did to my girl. Exploded her star drive section, cast down her saucer, crashed it on this planet. I blame Riker. He is always damaging starships. But now all is silent, as everyone has left. I saw the Farragut and Capley depart with much of the crew. There might be a salvage crew about, but I think we may be alone here, so let's chat about interesting topics. This one is prompted by an article written at the start of this year. In that article, written for Unheard, the former Greek economics minister Yanis Varoufakis opined about Star Trek and its in-universe economic system. The article was called Why the Left Needs to Watch Star Trek and was dated the 4th of January 2025. Its author concludes, "Today's moribund left could do far worse than to take its cue from Star Trek's bold embrace of a humanist anti-authoritarian communism." The comments section is worth reading, because the comments section is always worth reading. For my part, though, I doubt the Federation was ever meant to be communist. But the article does bring up an interesting question. Did the United Federation of Planets use money? There are references to Federation credits throughout the series. The original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, has a bartender offering to sell a tribble to Uhura for 10 credits. The Next Generation episode, The Price, has the Federation negotiator offering 1.5 million Federation credits to the Barzanian Planetary Republic, as well as 100,000 more a year for the rights to use their wormhole. That sounds so very wrong, doesn't it? And in The Undiscovered Country, Scotty mentions having bought a boat. Bought must surely mean an exchange of some sort. On top of Federation credits, there is also gold-pressed latinum. But the voyage home has Kirk remembering that money was used in the late 20th century. Later, there is the restaurant scene in which Kirk confirms they do not have money in the 23rd century. In the TNG episode The Neutral Zone, Picard says that people were no longer obsessed with the accumulation of things. Try not to say Chateau Picard. That Star Trek depicts a communist society without of course calling it that is crystal clear, writes Varoufakis. But it might be rather presumptuous to assume this. We cannot be sure of the nature of the Federation economic system, as our view of the Star Trek fictional universe is narrow and restricted. We watch through a lens darkly, or more accurately, a lens Starfleetly. A starship is run on military lines, and so we get a military view of the Federation. Imagine judging British society based purely on the adventures and day-to-day travails of the crew of a British submarine. Yes, we still actually have submarines. It would be unrealistic to do so. On that submarine, there is strict hierarchy, in which virtually everything is provided by the organization and so by the state. One angle Star Trek has yet to explore properly is the civilian side of the Federation. We have not really seen the non-military side. What is life like for ordinary people on Earth? DS9 did give us the restaurant of Sisko's father. This was Sisko's, in the French Quarter of New Orleans. I don't recall any talk of payment by the customers for Old Man Sisko's hard work. DS9 also gave us Quark's Bar, and many a Ferengi. We got the rules of acquisition. We got gold-pressed latinum, which seems to have been used as a quadrant-wide currency. There is the slip of gold-pressed latinum, and 100 slips are equal to 1 strip of gold-pressed latinum, and 20 strips are equal to 1 bar. Apparently, it cannot be replicated, unlike gold, and so it retained its value. I have seen an estimate that has a bar of gold-pressed latinum valued at between 10,000 and 20,000 US dollars, whilst according to Memory Alpha, a cadet's uniform would cost 5 strips and Quark's Bar 5,000 bars. There is a computer game from the turn of the century called Hostile Waters. It was made by Rage Software, written by Warren Ellis, and features the voice talent of Tom Baker, Paul Darrow, Linus Barber, Eric Myers, and Kate Ashfield, amongst others. It is a bit of an old favourite of mine. I bring it up because one of its underlying premises is a future society that uses nanotech and creation engines. The effect of this technology on the society of Hostile Waters is not seen in full, but what we do see suggests it is profound. The creation engines of the adaptive cruiser Antaeus are reminiscent of the replicators aboard the Enterprise. The replicators change the game. If you can have a machine make anything you want, anything you need, then would you need money? Well, presumably you would need to buy a replicator in the first place, and pay to keep it maintained. You would also need to pay for the raw materials from which produce is produced. In Hostile Waters, a specialized vehicle, called a scarab, gathers wreckage so it can be recycled by the creation engines of the Antaeus. What raw materials did the replicators of Star Trek use? According to the Next Gen Technical Manual, the replicators operate by using a phase transition coil chamber in which a measured quantity of raw material is dematerialized in a manner similar to that of a standard transporter. Instead of using a molecular imaging scanner to determine the patterns of the raw stock, however, a quantum geometry transformational matrix field is used to modify the matter stream to conform to a digitally stored molecular pattern matrix. In other words, it's magic. The manual goes on. In order to minimize replicator power requirements, raw stock for food replicators is stored in the form of a sterilized organic particulate suspension that has been formulated to statistically require the least quantum manipulation to replicate most finished foodstuffs. The replicators therefore require energy, computer memory, and raw materials. Where does this all come from, and is it supplied for free? The society of Star Trek is based on the idea of a post-scarcity society. Everyone works selflessly for the greater good and for their own betterment. But there are objections. Imagine if 50 people want to be a social influencer. God knows why they'd want to be, but let's imagine they did. But there are only 49 social influencer roles available. There is also one sewage cleaner role open, and so for the greater good, one of those 50 people must take up the sewage cleaner role. For how long would the sewage cleaner be able to work before their belief in the greater good crumbled? 49 people are happy. The 50th person is unhappy. How miserable might he become over time? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, but have the few been asked? Even Kirk concluded that the needs of the one outweighed the needs of the many. No matter how you square it, there is always someone who ends up unhappy, and they might choose to say no. What would society do then? The unhappy need motivation, and playing the martyr for the greater good might not cut it for very long. And so we have the invention of money. Money is a very useful motivator. Then there is the idea of bettering oneself. What if you are satisfied with yourself already? What if you do not want to strive to be better? It cannot be the case that all 9,000 million Earthlings are following this personal philosophy. That is not how the real world works. Not everyone believes in democracy. Not everyone follows the Catholic Church. Not everyone owns a Taylor Swift album. There are always those who disagree and rebel against top-down impositions. And this would be true of the Star Trek philosophy described by Picard in TNG. What happens to those people, those rebels? In certain countries and certain societies, the authorities would have a solution, and it would not be pleasant. Propaganda, brainwashing, re-education camps, and even the Federation equivalent of the Gulag. You will own nothing, not even your own mind, and you will be happy. Do you remember that Christmas song, The Little Drummer Boy? Have you ever wondered about those lines? Every child must be made aware. Every child must be made to care. Made to care. How do you make a child care? This line has always struck me, at least, as being rather sinister. Real people are not like the characters in Star Trek, which is why it is not an accurate guide to how a society without money might work. Gene Roddenberry insisted that humanity had evolved beyond the primitive state, had moved beyond the obsession with the accumulation of things. But this threatened to lead to a series full of wooden, two-dimensional people who agreed with each other and never questioned anything. The humans of a Star Trek future might well evolve beyond a primitive state, but they would do so by losing that which makes them human. Humanity needs struggle and challenge. Mankind evolved in the wild, where death stalked and men were prey. Those instincts have not faded, nor will they. Take away scarcity and struggle, and human beings become bored. Idle hands tend to make mischief. Witness the phenomenon of luxury beliefs. First world problems indeed. There are, of course, exceptions. Millionaires who invest time and money into worthy causes and projects which benefit all mankind. But these are not the rule. It depends on the individual, which is a challenge to the Star Trek Utopian model, for it can only work if it is the proverbial coat that fits everyone. It may be worth remembering that money, as a token of one's hard work, can create value, and value can create respect for property and the property of others. After all, they might sue you. If you have worked hard to earn money and then use that money to beautify your garden, for example, then you will respect the work put into that garden, even if you had professional gardeners hired to put in that work. You value the garden because you value the money you worked to earn. If you can just press a button on a state-supplied replicator, will you value what it so easily creates? Would others? By working for money, you convert your effort and energies, be they physical or mental, into something tangible, flexible, and usable. You can buy things such as food, property, experiences, education, etc. As long as it and its value is recognized by the majority of other people, your money gives you a degree of power over your own life. Would the real people of a real Star Trek future respect the property of others? Would they respect and value the skills and labour of others? So let's review what we have discussed. There were Federation credits and gold-pressed latinum. So yes, there was money. But these forms of currency only appeared when the Federation were face to face with non-Federation civilizations. Money inside the Federation seemed to have been non-existent, and work motivation was based upon self-improvement and the greater good. This utopian vision does not seem to have had much basis on the realities of human nature, but to be fair to Star Trek, it was a science fiction show set in a distant future, a future moreover in which humanity had supposedly evolved beyond man's primitive nature, thanks in part to technology and post-scarcity. But the true nature of the Federation is difficult to assess, as our perspective as viewers is limited to only Starfleet, a decidedly military organization. But this is all rather academic. Gene Roddenberry might well have leant communist, I honestly don't know. But there is no denying the change that came over Star Trek with his passing. The characters became more human, and the Utopianism became more tempered. DS9 even questioned it. As for money, I do not believe the individual writers of Star Trek really gave the question of money much serious thought. For example, the Federation was meant to be a democracy, and yet we never witnessed an election. The writers were thinking of great science fiction stories instead. Other worlds and alien civilizations were the world building they had in mind, and so Star Trek had an outward-looking aspect to it that pushed Earth and the Federation's economics into the background. The Unheard article by Vanis Varoufakis is interesting in the discussion it inspires, although I personally think he is wrong in his conclusions. He also seems a tad overwrought and utopian, but that might just be me. At the end of the day, I'm only here for the starships. And on that subject, the salvage crew must be hard at work by now. It's just as well the United Federation of Planets does not use money, as it would cost the total GDP of a small country to take this saucer section apart otherwise. Could they use a tractor beam to lift it into orbit, I wonder? A Nebula-class starship was above Veridian III and her crew didn't bother, so perhaps Starfleet will need a fleet of ships. But however they do it, the salvage of the sacred saucer will be quite the challenge.